The note was not meant for me to find. I know that now, of course. But on that rainy Thursday morning in February, standing in the laundry room with my husband's coat in one hand and a folded piece of paper in the other, I did not know anything except what I could see written in a handwriting that was not mine and not his. Tuesday, 7 p.m. Bring the apron. E. I read it 3 times. Then I set it on top of the dryer, smoothed it flat with my palm, and finished loading the washing machine as if my hands were not shaking. Walter had been acting strange for months. Not dramatically strange, not the kind of strange you see in movies where a husband suddenly starts deleting his phone or coming home smelling of perfume. It was quieter than that. He had been distracted at dinner, starting sentences and not finishing them. He had been leaving the house on Tuesday evenings around 6:30, telling me he was going to help his old friend Carl work on a truck engine, 3 weeks in a row. Walter had never once shown any interest in engines in 36 years of marriage. I had also found the credit card statement, $42 at a place called Cucina Bella. I looked it up. It was a kitchen supply store in the next town over. Walter did not cook. The man had burned toast with regularity until I finally bought a toaster with an automatic shutoff. He had no business in a kitchen supply store. And now this note, bring the apron, from someone who signed herself only as E. I told myself I was not the kind of woman who jumped to conclusions. I had been a school librarian for 31 years. I believed in gathering evidence before forming an opinion. But I was also 63 years old, and I had watched enough of my friends go through things they never saw coming to know that the most dangerous lies are the quiet ones. So I waited. I said nothing to Walter over dinner that night, or the next night, or the night after that. I watched him instead. I watched the way he checked his phone more carefully now, angling it away from me before setting it face down on the coffee table. I watched how he had started wearing cologne again on Tuesdays, the cedar and sandalwood kind I had given him for Christmas years ago that had sat untouched on his dresser until recently. I watched how he kissed me goodbye those evenings with something that felt almost guilty. Too long, too careful. The way you kiss someone when you are carrying a secret that weighs on you. On the 4th Tuesday, I did not stay home. I had spent the week preparing. I had called my daughter, Claire, in Phoenix, and asked her to send me her old catering apron, the plain black one from the restaurant job she had in college. It arrived in the mail on a Monday. I had also bought a pair of glasses with plain lenses, darker than my usual frames, and pulled my hair into a tight bun I never wore. I decided after practicing in the bathroom mirror, like someone else. I looked like a woman no one would bother looking at twice. At 63, that is not as hard to arrange as it sounds. Invisibility has a way of finding you whether you ask for it or not. I followed Walter that Tuesday evening, not closely. I stayed 2 cars back and kept my headlights low on the country roads east of our neighborhood. He drove 20 minutes out of town and pulled into the parking lot of the Millbrook Community Center, a brick building I had driven past 100 times without ever going inside. I parked around the back, near the loading dock where a catering van was idling. That was when I had my idea. There was a young woman unloading folding trays from the back of the van. She looked overwhelmed and distracted, which is exactly the kind of person who accepts help without asking too many questions. "Need a hand?" I asked, already reaching for a tray. She barely looked up. "Please. We're short-staffed tonight." I tied on Claire's black apron, picked up a tray of wrapped appetizers, and walked straight through the service entrance of the Millbrook Community Center. The main hall had been divided. One side was set up for a senior singles mixer, with small round tables and a DJ playing Glenn Miller at a reasonable volume. The other side had a long kitchen demonstration counter under bright lights, with rows of folding chairs facing it. A cooking class. Maybe 15 people seated, notebooks open, looking toward the front of the room, and standing at the kitchen counter, her back to the room as she arranged copper pots, was a woman I did not recognize. She was tall, dark hair with silver streaks pulled back in a braid, maybe mid-40s. She wore a professional chef's apron over a simple navy dress, and she moved around that kitchen counter the way people move in spaces they own completely, with total ease, touching things lightly, setting them in exactly the right places. I scanned the rows of chairs. Walter was in the 3rd row, second seat from the left. He had brought a spiral notebook. He was writing something in it already, before the class had even started. I pressed myself toward the side wall, keeping the tray of appetizers in front of me like a shield, and I watched. "Good evening, everyone," the woman said, turning to face the class. Her accent had a warmth to it, something Mediterranean underneath the American. "For those of you who weren't here last week, I'm Elena Russo. Welcome to Cooking for Someone You Love." The name hit me before I could prepare for it. Elena, bring the apron. And there was my husband in the third row, his reading glasses on, pen in hand, every bit as attentive as he had never once been at 31 years of holiday dinners I cooked without complaint. I nearly walked out. Not from heartbreak, from the specific, blinding anger that comes when you have suspected something for weeks and then found the thing you suspected and it is somehow both exactly and nothing like what you imagined. Instead, I kept moving through the room with my tray, offering small bruschetta rounds to the students and to the volunteers near the kitchen demo table. I had learned years ago that the best disguise is purpose. Look like you have somewhere to be, and no one questions whether you belong. I worked my way closer, close enough to hear. Elena Russo was demonstrating how to make a proper beurre blanc, which I gathered from the way she explained it was a butter sauce that sounded simple and was not. Walter, in the third row, was writing everything down. I could see his handwriting from where I stood, those large, looping letters I had watched, sign our mortgage and our children's birthday cards and our Christmas letters for 36 years. "The trick," Elena was saying, "is patience. You can't rush this part. You have to stay with it. A lot of people walk away, think they can come back to it, and by then it's broken." She paused. "That's true of a lot of things, not just sauces." There was a small laugh from the class. Walter smiled. Not the polite, obligatory smile I had been getting at dinner for the past 6 months. A real one. I offered bruschetta to the woman sitting next to Walter. She took one and whispered a thank you without looking up from her own notebook. I stood there one moment longer than I needed to. "Excuse me," Walter said, without looking up, holding out his hand. He assumed I was offering him something. I put a bruschetta on his palm. His eyes stayed on Elena Russo as she adjusted the temperature under her pan. He did not look at me. His own wife of 36 years, standing 2 feet away from him, and he did not look up. I had told myself I would not cry tonight. I did not cry in the side hallway when I set down my tray. I did not cry in the parking lot. I drove home in the dark and I put Walter's supper in the refrigerator and I went to bed before he got home. And I lay in the dark listening to the sound of his car in the driveway and his key in the lock and the quiet sounds of a man trying not to wake his wife, and I thought about 36 years. I thought about the 2 children we had raised and the house we had painted together and the vacations we had taken in the early years when we still took vacations and the decade in the middle when we could not afford to, and how somewhere in the stretch of years between then and now we had stopped sitting on the porch after dinner. I couldn't remember when, I just knew we had. I called my daughter Claire the next morning when Walter was at his physical therapy appointment. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Mom." Claire's voice went careful. "What's going on? Has your father said anything to you?" "About me. About us." A silence on the other end. "Too long." "Claire, he called me at Christmas," she said finally. "He asked me your ring size." "My ring size." "He said he wanted to upgrade your engagement ring for your anniversary. Said the original one was too small and he'd always wanted to give you something better." Another pause. "Mom, I thought you knew. I figured he would have told you by now. I swear I thought." I told her I had to go. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after that, looking at the window above the sink, the one that faces the backyard where our son Marcus had broken his arm, falling out of the apple tree when he was 9. The window I had stood at 10,000 mornings. My ring size. Cooking classes. Cooking for someone you love. I called the Millbrook Community Center from our landline using a voice I had not used since my librarian days, the crisp, professional one that brooked no nonsense, and asked to speak with whoever coordinated the adult education program. A young man came on the line. I explained that I was updating my husband's enrollment records for the Tuesday evening cooking class and needed to confirm the end date. "The session ends the last Tuesday of March," he said. 8 weeks total. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" "One more thing. Has the instructor mentioned any special session? A final dinner demonstration, perhaps?" "Oh, yes, actually. He sounded pleased to be helpful. Chef Russo does a capstone dinner for participants. They each cook a full meal from scratch. Some folks bring guests. It's lovely, from what I hear. I thanked him and hung up. I thought about going straight home and confronting Walter. I had the facts now, or most of them. The note, the kitchen store receipt, the Tuesday evenings, Claire's confirmation about the ring. I could have laid it all out on the kitchen table and let him explain himself and been done with it. But I had spent 6 weeks building a case in my head that had turned out to be built on sand, and I was not entirely ready to trust my own judgment. I needed to see it clearly, not through suspicion, not through fear. I needed to see my husband the way a stranger would. So the following Tuesday, I went back. This time I brought a casserole dish. Nothing announces a welcome visitor at a community center like a casserole dish. The same young woman was unloading the catering van, and she recognized me vaguely and waved me through. I found a spot near the far kitchen wall where a folding table had been set up for equipment, and I stayed there, half hidden behind a rolling cart, and I watched. The class was smaller this week. 12 people. Walter had arrived early, I could tell, because he had already organized his notebook and set a pen on top of it in that precise way he had, the particular tidiness he reserved for things he cared about. When we were young and he was studying for his real estate license, he had organized his study materials the same way. I had forgotten that about him. Elena Russo was walking the class through a dish she called her grandmother's lemon chicken, the way it had to be browned first in the pan, why the heat mattered, how to tell by sound whether the oil was ready. She was an excellent teacher. Patient. She let people make mistakes and then explained the correction without embarrassment. Walter made a mistake, added wine too early. I gathered from the small commotion, and she laughed and said it happened to everyone and showed him how to recover it. And Walter laughed at himself in the easy way he used to laugh, the way that had gotten smaller over the years until I had almost stopped noticing it was gone. At the break, I watched him approach Elena at the demo counter. My heart did the thing I had been trying to keep it from doing for 6 weeks. But then I watched what happened. He unfolded a piece of paper and spread it on the counter. A list, handwritten. He pointed at something on it, asking a question, his reading glasses back on his nose. Elena leaned over the list, nodded, pointed at something, said something I couldn't hear. Walter wrote in the margin. They were talking about ingredients, or a recipe, or both. He pulled his phone from his pocket and showed her the screen. She looked at it and smiled and said something, and he shook his head and said something back, and she laughed and wrote something down on a notepad and tore off the page and handed it to him. He folded it carefully and put it in his shirt pocket. He had not smiled that easily with me in longer than I could accurately remember. That was what broke me. Not suspicion. Something quieter and harder. The recognition that something had gone missing between us, slowly and without announcement, and I had not noticed until I was watching my husband smile at a stranger the way he used to smile at me. I left before the class ended. I drove to the parking lot of the pharmacy on Route 9 and sat there until I stopped crying properly, and then I drove home. Walter came home at 8:15. I was in the kitchen pretending to read. He hung his coat on the hook by the door, the same hook it had been hanging on for 22 years, and he came into the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water and said, "How was your evening?" And I said, "Quiet." And he said, "Good," and we watched the 9 o'clock news together and went to bed. We were two people who loved each other. I was nearly certain of that. And yet somewhere between the bills and the years and the children growing up and moving away, we had stopped saying it in any language the other one could hear. The capstone dinner was on the last Tuesday of March. I almost did not go. I went back and forth for 2 weeks. I told myself I had enough information, that I understood now what Walter was doing, that I should simply go home and wait for him to reveal it in his own time. But there was a part of me that needed to see it. The part that had spent 6 weeks building a story about my husband that turned out not to be true, and that needed to see the real story with its own eyes before it would believe it. I called the community center and registered as a guest. The young man on the phone told me capstone guests were welcome and asked for the participant's name. "Walter," I said. "Walter Briggs." "Oh, he's been so excited about this one," the young man said pleasantly. "He's making a 3-course dinner. Requested the corner station. Said he wanted the candlelight from the west window." I sat with that for a long time after I hung up. Candlelight from the west window. The evening of the capstone dinner, I wore the blue dress Walter had always said was his favorite. I did not tie my hair back. I did not borrow anyone's apron. I drove to the Millbrook Community Center alone, and parked in the front lot, and walked through the main entrance like someone who was exactly where she was supposed to be. The hall had been transformed. Each cooking station was set as a proper dining table for two, with cloth napkins and small candles and a single flower in a bud vase. The overhead lights were dimmed. Soft music played. The smell of a dozen different dishes filled the air in a way that was entirely warm, entirely human. Walter was standing at the corner station with his back to me when I came in. He was adjusting something on the table. The angle of the candle, the placement of the vase. He had worn his good jacket, the dark gray one I had given him for our 34th anniversary. His shoulders were set the way they get when he is nervous. I knew those shoulders. I had watched them carry things for 36 years. Elena Russo was making her way between the stations, checking on her students, offering last-minute guidance. She glanced up when I came in and paused, and I saw in her eyes the particular recognition of someone who has been told to expect you. "Mrs. Briggs," she said warmly, and held out her hand. "Walter has told me so much about you." "He's told me very little about you," I said honestly. She smiled. "That was the point, I'm afraid. He was very committed to the surprise." She leaned in slightly. "He is also a remarkably determined student for someone who has never in his life caramelized an onion. I want you to appreciate the effort." I laughed. It surprised me. "Coming out." She gestured toward the corner table. "Go on." Walter heard my heels on the floor. He turned around, and the expression on his face when he saw me in the blue dress in the doorway of that transformed hall. I want to say I will never forget it, but the truth is, I had forgotten it. I had forgotten that my husband looked at me that way. Not because he had stopped, I think, but because I had stopped seeing it. "You found me," he said. "You weren't very hard to find." He pulled out my chair. His hands were trembling slightly. I sat down across from him in the candlelight from the west window, and I looked at the man I had been married to for 36 years as if I were trying to memorize him. "How long have you known?" he asked. "Long enough to have drawn several very wrong conclusions," I said. He had the grace to wince. "I'm sorry. I know this has looked strange. I've been terrible at keeping secrets since we were married. I overcompensated. I went too far the other way." "You went considerably too far," I agreed. "I know." He reached into his jacket pocket and set a small velvet box on the table between us. 36 years, he said. 36 years ago, I gave you the ring I could afford on a junior broker's salary. You never said a word about it. You wore it every single day." He nodded at the box. "Open it." Inside was an emerald-cut diamond set in simple platinum. Beside it, tucked into the velvet, a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it. 2 dates. The date of our wedding, and next June. Below them, in Walter's large, looping handwriting, "Vow renewal, Savannah. Same church. Say yes." I looked up at him. He was watching me with that particular expression men get when they have done something they cannot take back and are no longer certain it was wise. "We got married in October," I said. "I know. The June date is your mother's birthday." I thought. He stopped. She would have wanted to be there. I thought it was a way to have her there. My mother had been gone for 4 years. Walter had sat in the front pew at her funeral and held my hand for the entire service without once letting go. I did not cry. I had already done that in a pharmacy parking lot on Route 9, and I was not going to do it again here in front of 12 other couples eating their capstone dinners. I folded the paper and put it back in the box and closed the lid. "The cooking classes," I said. "All of this. I wanted to cook for you. Properly. Not burned eggs on a Sunday morning. I wanted to make you the kind of dinner you've always made for me, without thinking about it, without needing a class or a note or any help." He glanced toward the kitchen behind him. "Tonight I am making you herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables and a lemon tart." Elena helped me practice the tart 4 separate times. The first 3 were catastrophic in ways I cannot fully describe. "And the apron," I said. "The note. Bring the apron." He looked momentarily puzzled. Then understanding crossed his face. "You found that. In your coat pocket, Dorothy." He rubbed a hand over his face. "She sends reminder notes to all the students. We had to bring our own aprons starting week 3. He shook his head slowly. I thought a great many things, I said. None of them were correct. I'm sorry. You should have told me. I know. You are a terrible secret keeper, Walter. I know that too. And you could have simply said you wanted to learn to cook for me. I would have thought that was wonderful. I wanted it to be a surprise. He stopped and looked at his hands on the table, those familiar hands I had held in every circumstance a life could produce. I wanted to give you something you didn't expect, something that wasn't practical, something that was just about you and me. The way things used to be. He looked up. We used to be good at this, Dorothy. Being just us. I don't know when we stopped. The candle between us made a small movement in the air from the heating vent. We got busy, I said, and then we got used to it. I don't want to be used to it anymore. I reached across the table and put my hand over his. In 36 years, a hand changes. It gets thicker and slower, the knuckles more pronounced, the skin softer. But the weight of it across your own is something you carry in muscle memory. It is something you would know in the dark. Go make my dinner, I said. I want to see if these classes did anything for you. He smiled. The real one. The one I had been watching from across a community center room for the past several weeks without being able to claim it. The salmon was, genuinely, very good. The roasted vegetables were slightly overdone on one side, but in a way that I found endearing. The lemon tart had a crust that crumbled in exactly the right direction, and a filling that was properly tart and not too sweet. Elena Russo came by our table twice, and I thanked her both times in a way I meant completely. At the end of the evening, when the other couples had drifted out and the volunteers were folding away the tablecloths, Walter and I sat alone at the corner station and finished the last of a decent Chardonnay he had thought to bring, and I told him what I had done. All of it. The laundry room and the note and the catering apron and the bruschetta tray, and standing 2 feet away from him while he watched Elena Russo make beurre blanc. He was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then he said, I didn't recognize you. No. 36 years and I didn't recognize you standing right next to me. You weren't looking. He absorbed that with the seriousness it deserved. No, he said. I wasn't. He looked at me. I'm going to start looking. So am I said. We drove home in the same car, which sounds obvious but had not been our habit on Tuesday evenings for the past 2 months, and we sat on the porch for the first time since I could not remember when, even though it was cold enough that I had to go inside for blankets, and we talked until almost midnight. Not about anything important. About Marcus, and his new job and Claire's daughter who was learning to walk, and the apple tree in the backyard that needed trimming, and a road trip Walter had read about through the Blue Ridge that he thought we might consider in and fall. We went to bed the same time. Here is what I know now, at 63, that I did not know at 35 or even at 50. The distance that grows between people who love each other is almost never dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It arrives the way winter arrives, not in a single storm but in the slow shortening of days, until one morning you look out the window and realize you can't remember what the yard looked like in summer. And the way back is not always dramatic either. Sometimes it is salmon with slightly overdone vegetables and a lemon tart that took 4 attempts. Sometimes it is a hand across a table and 2 people deciding, without any great ceremony, to start paying attention again. We renewed our vows the following June in Savannah, in the same church, with our children and 3 grandchildren, one of whom slept through the entire ceremony in Marcus's arms. The photographer we hired was young enough to be our grandchild. He told us we looked happy together. We do. I had forgotten, for a while, that we did. Walter still can't caramelize an onion without my supervision. He has not quite mastered the lemon tart. Every Sunday morning now he is in our kitchen by 8 o'clock, and I sit at the table with my coffee and I watch him try. And I tell him what he's doing wrong, and he argues with me about it, and we have breakfast together in a way we had not done in years. It is not perfect. It is better.